So, you want to go?
Yep. Now, who am I looking at as well, or am I doing straight to?
If you're looking at me.
Right, okay. Bill Beats is my name. Been a film producer and director for 35 years now. Commercial, been involved in a lot of TV work before, and I tended to make what were required, called motivational films. Is that okay?
Yeah. So the first question is, what is your favourite dystopia in fiction?
Well, I always struggle with that question because it brings into what is the definition of dystopian, which of course is meant to be this abject world where things are not quite as good. The big difficulty for me is the films that I perceive that it fits. Logan's Run, for instance, I perceive that as being a really good example of a dystopian film, but in fact some people actually think it's a utopian film, but I don't see it that way, so I would go for Logan's Run.
So why is that? Why that
one? Well, first of all, a lot of the actors that are in it are ones that I warm to, and I tend to have a kind of, how shall we say, a loyalty towards certain actors. But in fact, I think the storyline itself was unique because it poses a question about, and I would say in this case, world population. What do you do if there's too many? And of course, we cull animals because we think, well, we're going to cull deer because there's too many deer out in the forest. But of course, what happens if it works the other way, and this is what we do to ourselves? So I think from that point of view, it's a very clever way of making us think about things that are not necessarily just us.
Okay. Can you name some utopias in fiction?
Well, I can name three, but they're all got the preface of Back to the Future, because the three of them are utopian films. What I love about it is it's so clever because really what they're doing is they're taking technology that we see is either here today or it's just slightly ahead, and then propelling it back the way and taking it back to a different time period. And I love that association between gadgetry and history, and you sometimes wonder how would life been back then if they'd had the technology that we have today. You hear about how we deal with things like treating illnesses and gene development, and all sorts of specialised medical treatment. Gosh, how could we have benefited people if we're able to go back and say, don't worry, we've already got the cure for this, we can help you. So that type of thing I really tune into. And of course it's a comedy as well. It's got comic moments built into it, and I think its whole plot and its whole construction is clever. So I suppose that's what warms me to it. So I would use them as a good example of that kind of utopian type world. But most folk wouldn't look upon Back to the Future as being utopian, but I do.
Why do you think there are more dystopias than utopias?
I think it's because we revere bad things. Whether we like it or not, bad things amuse us. We'll go to black museums and wander around seeing all sorts of things that cause harm to people. We are interested in what happened in world wars and characters like Hitler and Mussolini and what they did and all the bad things that we did. In a sense, we're reliving what must have been horrific for people at the time. And I suppose what we're maybe getting out of that is a reminder that there's a duty on us to make sure things like that don't happen again. So maybe that's why, because we do like bad things, because it makes us think, how do we prevent them? But like newspapers tell us, bad news sells. So possibly that's why.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to give you some scenarios here, and these are potential futures.
Okay, now is this the ones you want me to replicate the question? You said the smaller ones?
No, that was the other ones.
Oh, right, okay. So I thought you said the smaller ones.
No. These are scenarios. So I'm going to give you a world where this is the future, and you've got to imagine you're in that world, and what would that be like to live in? What would be your role in that kind of society? And how close do you think this is to a potential reality?
Okay, got you.
And they're from varying distances in the future, so you can kind of take it as as you will.
Right, okay.
Future number 1. Civilization has been damaged by war, civil conflict and revolution. Britain is a province in one of 3 totalitarian superstates that rule the world. It is ruled by a mysterious leader who has an intense cult of personality. The government stamps out anyone who does not fully conform to their regime, using the police and constant surveillance through household devices.
Right, well, in that circumstances, being decidedly Scottish, I would become a rebel. I'd be thinking about how do you fight that system, because it wouldn't be one that I would feel comfortable with at all. I think maybe inbuilt me, but inbuilt into many people, is a desire to look after others. And if you felt that you were living in an oppressive world with an oppressive state, then I would be fighting against that. It's one of these ones where you want to bring unity, you don't want to bring division. And equality becomes very important. And if one person is perceived to be a higher quality than a lower quality person, that's not a comfortable world for me at all. In some way it parodies what's happening even in our society today, because we're seeing extremes now, even in our own political life, where rich people are getting richer and poor people are getting poorer. And that divide, as it's happening, is in fact a warning, which could ultimately lead to the situation that you described in the question. And out of that comes oppression. So I would see myself as the rebel that would be fighting everything that you just described in that question.
Okay, good. Future number 2. Earth is a founding member of an interstellar federal republic composed of numerous planetary sovereignties. The planetary governments agree to exist semi-autonomously under a single central authority based on the principles of universal liberty, rights and equality, and to share their knowledge and resources in peaceful cooperation and space exploration, while each member world retains its own political and social structures.
I'm going to use the word utopia, because that type of life is the correct one. Each of the attributes that you described there, I could feel myself internally nodding. I think it's so important that you see yourselves, we all see ourselves not just as a person, but as part of a group that's part of a larger group. Because as humans, we are tribal, we warm to people of our same tribe, and we seek out tribes. And I think a sense of belonging comes about. It's almost like dealing with brands and, in commerce nowadays, particularly branded products. But there is a sense of, if you're in a tribe and you have a loyalty to the tribe, it brings a sense of well-being and safety. And that was almost a basic human desire that the man really discovered in prehistoric years, that is pervaded throughout the years. So I would welcome the scenario that's described, and I would seek to support it and nurture it.
Future number 3. You're on an isolated, self-providing island in which the inhabitants have constructed a society that's cut off from the rest of the world. Self-appointed scientific experts rule with unlimited power. It is forbidden to even tell ordinary people that the Earth goes round the sun. There are no legal principles of natural law limiting the power of this elite of scientific experts.
Right, okay, you described it as the future, but in fact, rather interestingly, you're actually describing the past, because that's how it used to be. And in fact, a terminology, and also remember it in a filmic sense, Da Vinci Code, they talked about the Illuminati. The Illuminati were the people who brought light and illuminated this subject and said, no, this is incorrect, the world isn't flat, it is round, and what you're getting told is incorrect. I would see myself in that role as being an educator, as trying to learn as much as I could. I wouldn't be accepting what I'd been told, I'd be challenging it. But in learning what I would then learn, I would seek to pass it on. And out of that, hopefully people would have a better understanding that that is an oppressive society they've been living in. If you're not free to think and you're not free to explore, you're basically not free. And if one person is telling another person what to do, you're not really free. It's like living in two semi-detached houses where all the family in one house dictate everything that goes on in the next. It just won't work, and ultimately it's going to lead to conflict. So in that sense, I would see myself more as an educator. I'd be looking out to carry the mission. There's something wrong in this, and here's what's wrong with it, and pass it on so that the word would spread, and then people would hopefully see that society for what it is, flawed and dangerous.
Future number 4. The Scottish Government tells the truth about the climate and wider ecological emergency, reverses inconsistent policies, and works alongside the media to communicate with citizens. They commit to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2025, and these changes are overseen by a citizens' assembly appointed by sortition like a jury.
Again, I would welcome that. And whether I was part of it, I would certainly support it. I think the fact that you're bringing in somebody who's independent to assess what you've did is very important. It's not just important for you, the organisation, but it's also very important for others, the general populace, to be able to realise that what they're being told is in fact correct and that it's accurate. I think the intentions are very, very noble. Climate change is so important to us, and it's important that our leaders are truthful with us. We want our leaders to do something about it, and if they don't do something about it, we see them as being weak and ineffective. And if you compare that to the rhetoric that sometimes come out of political leaders, I won't mention the president's name by name, but he's a very good example of it, where you actually get statements get made that people know are inherently wrong. And if you see things that are wrong, people then doubt everything else that you say. So in fact, it's actually quite important that not only do we support it, but that we're part of it, and that we have somebody independent to say that's factually correct or that's factually incorrect. And when they highlight it,